Good morning. You're watching All You Need to Know on Bloomberg Quint Live, and I'm Alex Matthew. First, the headlines this morning. Asian markets are off to a steady start after a rise in U.S. equities. The dollar managed to hold on to gains. Oil prices were headed for their best first quarter in 17 years after Russia affirmed its commitment to maintaining its output cuts. The Reserve Bank of India successfully conducted a forex swap auction for $5 billion in a bid to ease the liquidity situation in the system. Mindtree has decided to not proceed with its proposed share buyback that was announced a couple of weeks back. The decision was taken at its board meet last evening. And Flipkart has set up an $80 to $100 million fund that will invest in early-stage startups working in the field of fintech payments and e-commerce. Let's talk about that Wall Street session. Now, Wall Street stocks rose on Tuesday, but sentiment was dampened by lingering fears that the economy is slowing. Now, the major averages pared their gains along with the benchmark 10-year Treasury yield, where the negative between the yields on the 3-month and the 10-year continue to hold. Bloomberg's Ranita Young tells you more in this report.
Here in the U.S., equities are higher with energy shares leading the gains in the S&P 500. We did see some concerns over slowing global growth start to recede within investors, as well as speculation that markets were oversold start to spark a little bit of a rebound in some risk assets. We did see oil surging on Russia's signal that it's committed to output cuts, as well as the yield on benchmark U.S. bonds climbing after falling below 2.4% on Monday. We did see the 3-month 10-year Treasury yield remain in the negative. However, some analysts did caution against panic over the recent yield inversion that happened for the first time in a few years on last Friday's session. Now, the U.S. dollar erased some losses against its major competitors, and the Bloomberg Dollar Index ended higher, but gold ended lower. We did see Apple back in the news today, again, a day after its flurry of services in which some analysts say more information was needed. Today, Apple's in the news, however, because a trade judge ruled that Apple infringed on a patent agreement with Qualcomm, and right now suggests an import ban of some iPhones. Now, that would definitely impact Apple in some way, since iPhones occupy a large part of Apple's sales strategy, bringing in about 62% of total sales during 2018. Meanwhile, we did see Bed Bath & Beyond back in the news after 3 activist shareholder funds are trying to oust its 12-person board, as well as the Bed Bath & Beyond CEO, claiming that Bed Bath & Beyond did not respond well to the rise of e-commerce. And that's a look at Tuesday's Wall Street action. In New York, I'm Ranita Young for Bloomberg News.
All right, let's head straight to Bloomberg's Rosalind Chin, who's joining us live from the Hong Kong studio with all the live market action in Asia. Morning, Rosalind. Well, how are we looking today? I couldn't get the cues that I wanted about half an hour back.
Yes, it's a little bit tricky to actually work out the big drivers in Asia today, broadly speaking, because there are different factors on the market. So, for example, we've got the MSCI Asia Pacific losing about 0.5% right now, but that's largely, of course, due to the weight of Japan. And Japan, a lot of the stocks there are trading ex-dividend today and, of course, trading lower. So we've got the Nikkei down by 0.6% and the Topix down by nearly 1% at this moment in time. Automakers among those falling there. So we've got the stocks, because of this ex-dividend factor and, of course, some not so great data out of the US overnight, showing that consumer confidence had fallen for the 4th month out of 5. That's, of course, driving sentiment a little bit in Japan. Elsewhere in the region, though, it isn't looking so gloomy. We've got China, the Shanghai Composite up by 0.5%, and the CSI 300 up by 0.6% right now. We do, of course, know that Robert Lighthizer, the U.S. Trade Representative, is going to go to Beijing on Thursday and Friday this week, along with Stephen Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, for more trade talks. And next week, Liu He, the Chinese Vice Premier, will be going to the U.S. for continuation of those talks. So while they haven't made a lot of progress in those talks, at least there is some movement there. We've got some news here in Hong Kong, though. The Hang Seng Index actually pretty much flat right now, but Cathay Pacific is performing pretty well, up by 2 points, just over 2% in fact at this moment in time. And that is on news that it's confirmed it is going to buy the budget airline Hong Kong Express from HNA. It's going to buy it for about 628 million US dollars, 287 million in cash, and the rest in promissory notes. And the deal is expected to complete by the end of the year. Cathay, of course, gets this chance to move into the budget airline space, one of the few airlines in Asia which hasn't yet done so. And so this is its golden opportunity. And for HNA, well, they've been selling their assets because they need to raise cash to pay off its debt pile, one of the biggest in Asia. So this helps it as well. Back to you.
Thanks so much for that, Rosalind. Now, since last week, US bonds have been in focus, and US Treasury bond yields continue to suggest difficult times ahead for the world's biggest economy, with a gap between the yield on the 3-month and 10-year papers still in negative territory. But that's even as analysts and policymakers question the meaning of what has been one of the market's most reliable recession indicators. Bloomberg's Lisa Abramovich has this report.
As we see the amount of negative yielding debt surge beyond $10 trillion, the most since the beginning of 2017, the question is, what is the effect on markets? This now accounts for 1/5 of the entire broad investment grade bond market in the world, negative yielding debt. Take a look at just how much this volume has climbed. And basically, people are arguing that this is going to continue pushing investors into riskier assets, whether that's corporate bonds, whether that's stocks. If you flip up the board, this helps explain why you do have an increasing appetite for investment grade debt. This is the short interest on LQD. That is one of the biggest investment grade bond ETFs out there. It has fallen to the lowest since in more than a year, since early last year, as people basically step away and say, you know what, we don't see how interest rates are going to rise materially. We don't really see how in the U.S. Credit costs are going to increase for these companies. So it's sort of interesting to watch the effects of this surging negative yielding universe.
Well, on to the updates on Brexit. After multiple humiliating defeats, there might just be some hope for Theresa May. One of the biggest critics of her deal, Jacob Rees-Mogg, has decided to back the deal, although reluctantly. Could that support be too little too late? Kathleen Hayes explains the timelines.
This one didn't just say, we don't like your deal. Let us take over for a day. We'll find a consensus by voting on all these different planks or the kinds of plans we could have. But it's interesting that when she woke up this morning, it turned out that Jacob Rees-Mogg, in his podcast, had said, as he's had in the past, I don't like her deal at all, but it's better than the alternatives. And this is important because he is the chairman of the Conservatives' Brexit caucus. He's the leader of the Brexit European research group that has been so much opposed to her deal. What he said again, her deal is in no way a good deal. Against that, there are the threats of a long delay and many people in Parliament who want to frustrate the result of the referendum. This is a difficult political situation. Difficult it is because guess what? Theresa May has to get this deal passed by Friday to prevent two things that nobody wants, a hard Brexit or a very long extension. She's going to meet tomorrow with Conservative MPs who may offer support in exchange for resignation. She's once again not gotten support from the Democratic Unionist Party of Northern Ireland, very important. Brexit supporters, in fact, might support May's deal just to ward off the softer Brexit. It's interesting that the Telegraph is reporting that in addition to Jacob Rees-Mogg, there are now 10 more of the Eurosceptics on her side, including the former Brexit Secretary, David Davis, who says that it has a reasonable chance of passing, and it better because if not, there could be a complete cascade of chaos. A government official telling Bloomberg earlier that they're considering a vote on Thursday again of the deal, but only if there's a chance of winning. And yes, maybe this gives it a chance.
I want to say what happens now, but of course we know this throws the door open to so many different possibilities.
Well, let's try to run through some of them, Heidi, because it's along this. Look, they want to take over control of the process because they say Theresa May couldn't get a consensus. We can do it if we look at the alternatives and have an indicative votes, which they've been talking about for a while. Now, one thing that they could vote on, but they probably won't because it's been rejected twice. That's a no-deal departure, the hard Brexit. Here's some other things. A Canada-style free trade agreement, May's Brexit deal. Remember, it's the only one the EU has approved. May's deal plus membership in a customs union, which would keep no tariffs on goods that go between the EU and the UK. Norway Plus, which is May's deal, a custom union, and the single market. The single market ensures the 4 freedoms that are so important: free movement of goods, capital, services, and labor. Now, one that could pass, one more on the list, revoking Article 50. If you revoke Article 50, well, you could stop the deal entirely, or you could just pause. Now, tomorrow, Wednesday, that is, instead of Theresa May taking control at the top, the benchback MPs will control the agenda starting at 2. John Bercow, the Speaker, will select the plans to be voted on around 7 p.m., voting yes or no. That's what happens. By the end of the night, we should see a credible set of alternatives. At least that's what people are hoping for. But another exciting day looms for the Brexit melodrama, doesn't it?
All right, well, that's the latest when it comes to the Brexit. Obviously, one of the top stories we'll be tracking through the week. You can check out all the updates on the website as well. That's BloombergQuint.com. For now, let's turn to the markets and how they're likely to fare today. To tell you all about that in the trade setup for the day, we have with us Agam Vakil. Good morning, Agam. That and the levels that you're watching for the F&O space.
Right. Well, it's going to be crucial because there's 2 sessions left for expiry. I'm going to watch out for some of those aspects. Of course, SGX Nifty declining by around 34 points right now. We've seen gains across the board for the Nifty as well as the broader markets. Even the banking indices have seen some amount of gains. So we are, in fact, the PSU banking index up 3%. ADRs, again, we have a mixed picture there, but we have seen gains in Vedanta, HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, and Tata Motors. Of course, Dr. Reddy's and Wipro, among others. FI buying has returned, about 1,000 crores odd bought this time, and 197 odd crores sold on net basis from DIIs. And moving on to your contributors, once again, the large caps, essentially the heavyweights, Reliance, HDFC Bank, Kotak Mahindra Bank, and ICICI Bank. It was the financials, essentially, which led the large part of the gains. Moving on to your futures and options space, rollovers, again, have started to pick up, 43% for the Nifty. And as far as the Nifty banking futures are concerned, the rollovers stand around 34%. So watch out for that. In terms of the levels we're keeping an eye on is open interest distributions, 11,400, 11,500 in max OI, even though 11,000 is a bit far off. Of course, we're seeing a lot more writing around the 11,400 and 500 puts, considering the Nifty moved up higher. But moving on to your VIX, that's down by as much as 1%, not too much change. And as far as the Nifty put call ratio is concerned, that has also risen to around 1.64 from around the mark of 1.5. In terms of your F&O bands, we have Adani Enterprises, Adani Power, and IDBI Bank in the F&O band, as is the case for Jet Airways and Reliance Power. Jet Airways, of course, is the new entrant in the F&O band. On the other hand, what has come out of the F&O band is okay, so we do have the other stock which is moved, but in terms of GAIL, L&T and ACC, we do have a lot of traction with an increase in open interest, and in terms of unwinding, we're looking at Chennai Petro, DC Bank and Sun TV. So watch out for some of these levels, and again, we're expecting some amount of volatility as we move to trade today, Alex.
All right, thanks so much for that, Agam. Well, let's look at what's making headlines across the globe. Sue Keenan of Bloomberg News brings you the first word headlines.
We start with President Xi Jinping. He has wrapped up his short tour of Europe, vowing to work together to safeguard multilateral trade and improve global governance. A joint statement says upholding international ties is the best way to tackle common threats and boost world prosperity. The EU is China's biggest trading partner, and it wants to solidify the relationship while pressuring Beijing on its trade practices. Trade talks resume this week with President Trump again pledging, quote, an excellent deal. Top negotiator Robert Lighthizer and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin fly to Beijing for talks on Thursday and Friday with their counterpart from China, traveling to Washington next week. The U.S. is concerned that China is backtracking on earlier pledges, while Beijing is pushing back at proposals it sees as one-sided. To Apple now, Apple facing a potential ban on U.S. imports of some iPhones after a U.S. International Trade Commission judge ruled it had infringed a Qualcomm patent. However, in a separate Qualcomm case, the ruling coming out on the same day, the verdict went Apple's way instead, highlighting the complexity of the ongoing battle between these two tech giants. Qualcomm jumped as much as 2.6% on the first ruling, while Apple pared gains and closed down 1%. Boeing says it'll submit a final software fix for the 737 MAX jet and give it to the FAA by the end of the week. It also says the update has already been flight tested. However, China's aviation regulator has suspended its own airworthiness certificate for the MAX jets. The Beijing office says it needs to make its own review of Boeing's proposed software fixes before allowing the plane to fly again after the two recent fatal crashes. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists in more than 120 countries. I'm Sue Keenan. This is Bloomberg.
Oil prices are quite high right now, relatively to where they've been. WTI is up about 32% this year, trading at around $60 a barrel. Brent, the global benchmark, is up about 26% this year so far, trading around $68 a barrel. The main factor for this is really these OPEC cuts that were implemented in January and are scheduled to go through the first half of this year. We've really seen that curb global inventories, it's curbed supply, and that's really sustained, kept prices higher. The other factors, of course, have been disruptions from Venezuela and Iran, but those are the main factors that are driving it forward. I think looking forward, we'll have to see if OPEC continues to implement those cuts. Like I said, they're scheduled to go through the first half of this year, but we'll have to see if they want to continue them or if there's an exit strategy after that.
This market today, it's tight. You're drawing inventories at a rate of 1 million barrels per day. The market is backwardated. In fact, that point about the fundamental physical market has to drive the paper market, dated Brent drove paper Brent higher. And you can see it and look at the spreads. We're getting more backwardated. So you have a really tight market today. But as you look out, you have that pipe capacity coming out of the Permian going into 2020, and so the back end is staying anchored. This is an ideal environment for investors, at least for oil.
Great chart that just kind of reminds all of us that the impact that shale has had and how dramatic it's been. So what does this mean for pricing over, I don't know, what kind of visibility do you have?
Well, at least, over the next couple of years where you have a comfort, you're really range bound. The low end, if something bad happens, you go down and probably test 45 to 50. Yeah. You get really tight like we did last year, which you could see again this year, go up in that 75 to 80 range.
I always wonder, Jeff, what that means then for future investments and future production. These guys have to make their investments. They've got to spend their money ahead of time before the payoff. So what does it mean for that?
Well, investment is down. Alex and I were talking before the show here about big oils becoming big energy. Yeah. Because of decarbonization, you're not seeing the investment that you historically would in dirty products, oil included. So as you look out further, let's say 5-6 years, you start to see a shortage due to the investment. But I like to be careful about calling those big structural bull markets. People were talking about it in 1995. Mm-hmm. It didn't happen until 2004.
So then what's your prediction for the back half? When we have all the Permian coming online and the pipelines picking up, and then OPEC delayed that decision until June, what's your base case? Our
base case is we go back to 60, go up to 70, and then come off.
But does OPEC continue the cuts till 2020? Or
this market will be balanced most likely by the end of April, early May. So they'll have to start talking about exit strategies, and they want to because they want to keep that back end low. They want to have backwardation because it reduces the ability for E&Ps to hedge.
The key, though, to the back half of the year in your call has to do, I'm sure, with what's going to happen with Iran. If you come inside the Bloomberg, it shows exports really diving after those sanctions. We don't know about the waiver situation. How do you factor that into your balance call?
Well, we see Iran coming off about another 300,000 barrels per day. It's running around 1.45. You lost 200. But let's look at North Korea, Iran, and Venezuela. Which of those three does the current administration have the best chances of forcing a regime change? Venezuela. I think they'll concentrate more of their effort there. Now, the headline reduction in the waivers come this May will likely be much larger because countries like Italy are not using them. Right. And places like Japan are already cutting off their imports of the Iranian oil. So we're comfortable with that 300,000 number. Headline number, we may be bigger, but we think the administration is going to focus on Venezuela.
There are a bunch of stocks we're looking at today, starting with Sheela Foam's offer for sale. The promoter wants to sell 42.3 lakh equity shares, which is 8.68%, with an oversubscription option of another 2% stake. The floor price has been set at 1,100 rupees per share, which is at a discount of 15.6% from current market price. The company can raise a maximum of 573 crore rupees. Then we have Wockhardt. Ireland HMPRA and UK's MHRA carry out joint inspection of the Aurangabad facility. The company says that HPRA has granted GMP certificate for a period of 3 years till January 2022. Mindtree has decided not to proceed with the share buyback. The company will constitute a panel on L&T's unsolicited offer. Apurva Purohit will lead this panel of independent directors. RBI imposes a 2 crore penalty on Punjab National Bank during assessment of implementation of SWIFT-related operational controls. Meghmami Organics says accidental fire broke on its Gujarat plant on March 26th. The company says it's ascertaining the loss caused by the fire and is fully covered for insurance claim. Allahabad Bank's board approves raising equity of up to 4,000 crore rupees, provided the stake of Government of India remains not less than 52% of the paid-up capital. ICICI Prudential Life Insurance OFS gets demand of 6.29 times at an indicative price of 316.11 rupees per share as per the exchanges. The insurance house has also cut down its stake in Jyoti Labs from 5% to 3%. Lastly, let's have a look at the bulk deals. Morgan Stanley France SAS acquired 3.16 lakh shares, which is 0.68% of PVR at 1,572.9 rupees per share.
On the big brokerage calls for the day, first we have is Macquarie on Strides Pharma, where the brokerage has upgraded the counter to outperform from neutral and has also hiked the target price to 532 from 486. Now the brokerage is expecting Strides Pharma's US business to be the key margin driver on the back of market share gains and a strong launch pipeline. Now it also expects the company's EPS to triple in financial year 2020 compared to financial year 2019 on the back of improved visibility in the US, branded Africa and strong growth in other key regulated markets. Lastly, it is also expecting a lower debt from the company in financial year 2020 and is expecting its EBITDA to net profit translation to improve starting from FY20. The second note we have is on Jain Irrigation, where Deutsche Bank has maintained its sell rating on the stock but has cut down the target price to 56 from 65. Now, according to the brokerage, Jain Irrigation has been caught in a debt trap as its elongated working capital and interest payments are eating into its operating cash flows, thereby leaving a negligible room for debt repayments for the company. Now, the company's net debt has increased due to its aggressive growth pursuit, that is acquisitions and elevated capex level. Now it's also its leverage ratio, that is the net debt to EBITDA, has expanded to around 4.1 times, says the brokerage. Lastly, along with this, its core retail micro irrigation business remains challenged due to lower cotton prices, a lower cotton area and a lower subsidy that has been provided by the government.
Well, online e-commerce giant Flipkart is now setting up an early stage fund to back young companies, a first of its kind fund by the e-commerce giant. Now, Flipkart said in a statement that through this fund, it is looking to back companies in the areas of fintech, payments or other complementary e-commerce areas as it is looking to build products focusing on, for the next set of consumers coming in from smaller town, tier 2 and tier 3 towns. Now, Flipkart's chief financial officer, Emily McNeil, will be heading this fund. Now, Flipkart did not disclose the fund size, but according to a person privy to development, the fund is going to be around $80 to $100 million, where Flipkart will be looking to cut checks about $2 to $3 million per company.
we copy the key of your priority, you're in position for a P alpha release, and we see you making your way up the bridge.
All right, lots of big stories to talk about this morning, and you'll find all the live market action right here on Bloomberg Quint Live. So do tune in over the course of the day. For now, you can find several stories on the website that I assure you are worth reading. First up, former Reserve Bank of India Governor Raghuram Rajan has expressed doubts that the Indian economy was growing at 7% when not enough jobs were being created. He also said that the cloud over the gross domestic product numbers must be cleared by appointing an impartial body to look at the data. And the National Company Law Appellate Tribunal stayed 2 notices issued by the Department of Telecommunications to Reliance Communications for scrapping its spectrum permits due to a delay in payment of dues. That's all you need to know going into trade today. Do stay tuned, like I said, over the course of the day for all the live market action and top news in the world of business and politics. This is Bloomberg Quint.